Folks, welcome back to a surprise Crossing Swords podcast episode because Kevyn Adams has just been fired as the general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. Jarmo Kekalainen is taking his place, and I did not imagine that the Buffalo Sabres would actually do this. We heard a lot of smoke, and we heard a lot of reports from a lot of respected people in the Buffalo media, and it came true. The Sabres got back from their 6-game road trip, which they somehow split, winning their last 3 games. And today, just before 2 p.m., the announcement comes. Terry Pegula just put out a release as well, thanking Kevyn Adams for his time, but the organization isn't where it needs to be. And now we have an interesting point because the Sabres have a ton of massive moves, and it's reassuring that, they got rid of Adams. We're going to go through his whole tenure as GM here together. So if you're watching, at home, at school, at work, comment how you're feeling about the Sabres, this Adams move. Are you happy? Are you upset? I think a lot of people, though, are on the happy side because it's been 6 years of learning, which is not what you want from the guy at the helm of an organization deep in a playoff drought. We can look through even Adams' tenure as a Sabre general manager is probably one of the biggest, most consequential, GMs in Sabres history. If you look back, signing Taylor Hall, the Jack Eichel trade, everything, that's happened in his tenure has been very consequential for this team. And, that's why people aren't happy because he's been here. We're seeing now the Sabres are, not in last place in these technically. Carson is just joined. We'll get him in here in 1 second. And Carson, we know we talked last show on, the possibility. We saw a lot of smoke, saw a lot of fire, and now we're seeing it happen. What are your thoughts here as, the news is just breaking that Kevyn Adams is gone from the Sabres?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a Kevyn Adams defender when it comes to
kind of saying get the burner going.
Yeah. I know people were saying that. I think that's a little bit,
a little mean.
My opinion is kind of widely turned. I believe on him, but obviously, I made the point last time too. As a personal thing, I do think it kind of stinks for anybody to get fired from their job probably a week or two before Christmas, right? But when it comes to, as Mike Bunt would say, it's a business, and if the results weren't there, I think Terry Pegula made that very well known in his PR statement. Regarding the team, that, hey, we have a standard to uphold. Whether or not that standard's been upheld this last decade is a completely different conversation, right? But they didn't get the job done through Adams' tenure. I will say he was the closest out of any of the past 2 or 3 GMs since Darcy to get there. 91-point season, and he had, I think, an 84-point season as well. So they did have the most success under Kevyn Adams. I do want to point that out. But this, I think, was a move that, when you look at it in the future, this team probably was one that they realized, hey, maybe we had to make this. And I think that's kind of the perspective that they had, especially when it comes to the future contracts of Tuck and then Doan with an extension eventually coming up and other guys, and proving to also your top talent like Darlene and Tage, like, hey, we're serious about this. The time to win is now. And Kevyn Adams did say that too. They didn't quite end up winning. I thought maybe a 3-game win streak would maybe delay this a little bit, again, towards the end of the holidays. And maybe they would wait from a PR perspective to wait until maybe a loss just so it looks better, or some of that, jinx type of thing, I guess, ideology. But that wasn't the case here. They let him go. And at the end of the day, it's a business, as Mike Bunt always says, and a lot of other people, it's a business. And that was kind of what happened today. And Jarmo Kekalainen, first off, also, rest in peace to his dad. I think that's kind of a difficult loss for anybody, let alone especially right now. And now he's, just a few hours later, he's named GM of the Sabres. So probably a lot going through his head, to say the least. Obviously, family always comes first, so there might be a little bit of a curve on when he actually picks up the reins here and maybe makes the trip back from Europe if he does end up making the trip. Or I don't know the specifics on that, but there might be a little bit of a gap here. Regardless, though, news is the news. I think we did, to a certain extent, a lot of people saw this coming. We saw the smoke where there's fire sometimes. For the last 2 years, wasn't the case. This time, it just felt a little bit different, and in fact was.
It did, and nothing yet on the staff. I can't imagine, that's going to be a move made by Terry. That's going to be a move made by Jarmo when he gets under control. And then, Carson, I got another question. You'll kick it back real quick. Are you shocked or surprised, or is this what you expected, that there wasn't, they didn't put Adams in a different role than the organization. That was a conversation that, people were having. Would we see Kevyn Adams remain with the Sabres? Based on that press release, does not look like it at all. Wasn't like he's being moved to here. Jarmo's taking this spot. Are you surprised that Kevyn Adams was, fully let go from the organization?
I don't know. It's kind of tough. Like my dad always says this saying, it's funny enough, like give them a raise and put them in management to the people that are, inefficient or ineffective at their job. So to a certain extent, I thought maybe they would. Again, local guy, spent a lot of time with the team, whether it was assistant coach or, a little bit of scouting in the Harbor Center as well. I thought maybe, there's a rumor for a long time that maybe they'd want to promote him to president of hockey ops or something along the lines of that. But the last few weeks, I leaned towards, hey, maybe not. Maybe they just are completely going in a different direction. I know Chad came out with a report too that he thought that was unlikely, and a few other people did as well. So what I'm curious about, though, is what Elliot Friedman really kind of held off the other night of saying, he acknowledged, hey, there's smoke, but they're also having a conversation with Kevyn Adams. So it almost seemed like Kevyn Adams had the opportunity to save his job from what Elliot was saying, but the reality of it is, like, let's be honest, they knew the decision. It's not like anything Kevyn was probably going to say today was going to back up the last, 6 years or 6 seasons. So I don't know how that was kind of worded by the national media versus the local media was really interesting to me. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I think this one we saw it coming for a minute though. And maybe I thought they would keep him inside the organization in a different role because it was clear that Terry did love him and, the things that he contributed towards the organization, but I guess they decided not to. And ultimately, I don't think I'm that surprised. Maybe a few other people are, but no, not today, I guess, for Terry.
Yeah, I was a little, I don't know if surprise was the right word, but there was a part of me that was kind of expecting it. And based on just how the Sabres have been, you look at it from that business sense, like it feels like that it's a move being taken seriously, that, they're trying to start new here and, not a full, clean house, but you're changing the guy making the decisions when you have such massive moves to make, not only in this offseason, but really, we're closing in a couple months away from the trade deadline. You got to figure out what to do with a guy like Alex Tuck. You got, re-sign Josh Stone. You have, we always look at the Sabres as being a salary cap floor team, but they're going to be spending a lot of money on guys who, aren't going to be productive to the lineup, or there'd be $6 million towards Skinner. You'll have, $4 million towards Greenway next season. There's, it's not like Sabres have to have endless money to spend to keep these guys in house. So I'm excited to see what Jarmo does here. And, Carson, I'm looking through just the trade history of Kevyn Adams, and it's interesting to see how his tenure as a general manager has changed from making the Taylor Hall signing. We get the incredible soundbite of, we're not just trying to make the playoffs, we're trying to win the Stanley Cup, and how quickly that came burning down. And even just, the Eichel trade, you're seeing, Matt Savoy traded, bringing Ryan McLeod. His tenure as a general manager has really evolved. And, there's moves there that, even the Cousins trade of bringing in, a Josh Norris, like, what is your thoughts, Ben, of Adams' evolution as a general manager? Because he, came into a job he really didn't seem like was prepared for, and his tenure has evolved a bit here and there.
Yeah, he went out, signed Taylor Hall in the opening months as the general manager, and I thought that was kind of a statement. I will say, though, I think that was more of kind of a Ralph Kruger effect at the time, because him and Taylor Hall were like really oddly close from Edmonton. And then after that, it kind of went silent a little bit. You were in the midst of a full rebuild, right? And they kind of tore it all down. But then there were a lot of reports from outsiders, whether it was Friedman, LeBron, Kevin Weeks. They were saying, hey, he's a little gun shy to make a trade sometimes. He's afraid to maybe get bit. He made the Eichel trade, too. That we shouldn't forget that. I think for the return that we got for Eichel, I think that was a fine trade. And then to pick up where I left off here with him being a little bit of gun shy sometimes, we did see that a little bit throughout his time and his tenure. But then he makes a trade for trades for Josh Norris and the Dylan Cousins trade. I think that is kind of a trade that is that's pretty significant. And then they also gave him the leash here in the offseason to trade JJ Peterka away, which was kind of interesting, especially if you're going to let your active general manager go 32 games and after that trade. I think that was a very interesting take that they let him trade him there. But regardless, I think the return that we got for JJ Peterka looks, at least at this point in time, looks extremely solid. Josh Jones went an absolute dog. Michael Kesselring went healthy. Hopefully can turn into a true top four defenseman and kind of continue his development path. So it was kind of hit or miss with Kevyn and the aggressiveness or sometimes the lack thereof that you see. But at times, I thought there were some things to be left desired, especially after that 91-point season when the best we could do was Connor Clifton and Erik Johnson afterwards. Maybe the politics behind that is a different conversation. But at the end of the day, they bet on internal growth was a lot of their mindset. And a lot of it was, well, if this thing happens and that thing happens, then we're going to be a pretty solid hockey team. And it just kind of never seemed to go that way.
Yeah, it definitely – it feels like, I've used the analogy before just about how the Sabres have been of, you're on a sinking ship, you have one hole plugged, one opens up and you move your thumb from one to fill the other. And it's, the difference of not making the right move or, whatever that has been for him, it has been troubling. But I want to go through like all the trades he's made as general manager and moves and just how long he's been here. Like his first move was bringing in Eric Stahl from Minnesota and sending Marcus Johansson there. Like that seems like an absolute lifetime ago. And, he's been here that long. Yeah, it's 5 years for him. That's a long time, but that's a move that, I guess Stahl's with the organization now. But I want to go through these couple others with you with some of these big moves looking back on his tenure, some draft picks, then moving Stahl to Montreal, trading Brandon Montour for a third-round pick, bringing Curtis Lazar or sending Curtis Lazar and Taylor Hall to Boston for Anders Bjork and a second-round pick. And just, yeah, you have that. And then even just like the Rasmus Ristolainen move, which, you got Isak Rosén out of, you had Robert Hagg for a couple games. You brought in Devin Levi, and I believe that might have been Rosén for Sam Reinhart. There's some big moves here. And then obviously the big one, getting rid of Jack Eichel for Peyton Krebs, Alex Tuch, and a couple picks there. So there's, that one stretch in the early in his tenure, you keep having these big moves from him. And it feels like we had a little lull in the middle. And then this past, year, we had Dylan Cousins, you had JJ Peterka. So my question for you, Carson, is now that Jarmo is taking over as general manager for the Sabres, what do you want to see from him now? Do you want to prioritize an Alex Tuch situation? Do you want to see, maybe guys off the roster who kind of feel like quote unquote mainstays? What's that look like for you?
The framework of the team is there. I think, and I want to say, I don't know if I'm going to say this directly in the most accurate way possible, but I think Kevyn Adams did the dirty work for the team, if that kind of makes sense. Like the core is there. You have parts of development that was achieved under Don Granato with certain players. You started to see some veteran presences come in, like Danforth, who is directly tied with Jarmo. I don't think that signing happens without Jarmo. And then you have guys like Greenway, who are veterans, Zucker with us, signed with us last year. Those are veteran guys who are valued in this league. And I think right now it's just kind of a little bit of a retool, I think is the right way to go about it. We've seen some things when Josh Norris is healthy that have looked really, really promising. And when you get Kesselring back, you hope, which will be soon, you hope that he can turn it up a notch. Those first 9 games weren't probably his best games. But guys like that, I think it's just right now, I think it's probably letting Jarmo view and value what his eyes are telling him, because obviously the two had a different approach. I think Elliot Friedman said on the podcast 32 Thoughts that Jarmo started off slow with Kevyn Adams. He didn't want to take the reins and kind of like take that job for him, because that's just kind of, for lack of a better term, a dickhead move to do, because at the end of the day, Kevyn Adams was the guy, right? He was calling the shots, whether people liked it or not. And then as of late, per Friedman, that Kekäläinen had a little bit more of a say in what things were going on, and he got a little bit more involved. And I think that was kind of a tell that, well, maybe something might be going on here. But as far as what's next, I think a Tuck extension or a move with him, if he's not going to, I think that's the number one priority, either extending him, or if you know the answer on that, or you're not comfortable with the price range that he wants, I think the return on that is something to keep an eye on. And then also, your extensions that are coming up, some of your UFAs, RFAs, those are big. And then also, what's going to happen to the goalie position, right? Is Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen maybe a guy who they look to move or dish off? Lyon got some calls about the Edmonton Oilers just, a week ago before they went after Tristan Jarry. Devin Levi, he's a year away from, I believe, being eligible for waivers. So that's something they're going to have to keep an eye on. Colton Ellis, what's going to go on with him? Like the roster construction with 3 goalies is kind of a mess. And then also, what are they going to do with guys like Östlund and Roseanne? So you have a push right now from your affiliate team in Rochester with guys who are ready. Hellenius isn't too far off. But at the same time, this team's been so young for so long now, and age, not games played. I want to make that very clear, that you're going to have to make a decision. Are you going to embrace these younger guys and reward them, which Kevyn Adams would lean towards more times than not? Or are you going to go out and get veteran guys because you know the time's ticking here on some of your veteran guys that you have in that locker room, such as Tuck, Thompson, Dahlin, Samuelson, even Byram, and try to make a real push? I think right now, if you're looking at Kekäläinen's history, he's a guy who takes risks. He's ready to play. I think the latter is probably going to be something to keep an eye on. And you look at it, nobody predicted. I believe he was the one that signed Johnny Gaudreau. Nobody predicted that, right? Like, he's a guy who's going to go all in. And I'm kind of excited about that. Hopefully that translates to his role with the Buffalo Sabres.
And you brought up a good point, Carson, I didn't really think about, but NFL, NHL, very different, but you see a regime change in the NFL, and it's almost a clearinghouse of, this guy wants to bring in their players, their coaching, whatever. You look at the Sabres roster now, like, it is basically entirely, Kevin's Adam guys, whether it be draft picks of Roseanne and Awesome, these younger guys, or even guys brought in via trade, whether that be Peyton Krebs, Alex Tuck. You have Josh Doan there, who people love. Michael Kessering is expected, possibly to make his, return to the lineup on Thursday. It's very interesting because you talked about goaltending too, and that's the big one of, UPL really being, it feels like a Kevyn Adams guy of trying to get him to be the number one in Buffalo. Even like a guy like Owen Power, who, we're not seeing the return I think a lot of fans would want to see from his play on ice. But you could say the same thing about a guy like Mattias Samuelsson, who's now really finding his game. It's interesting because I would have guessed like a guy like Owen Power would be, I don't want to say untouchable, but a guy that Kevyn Adams would want to keep and, not sell before he hits his, his peak and we know what we can get out of him. But now they have Jarmo here, a guy that you said, Carson, can swing big, that will make moves and isn't afraid to do that. I think this really opens up the Buffalo Sabres roster to see a lot more changes that I think we were going to be expecting going into this trade deadline season. And I think this could be a really big thing to get the most out of some players where they don't have that, quote unquote stability. And we can see a little bit more fire night in and night out. But yeah, I think it's interesting to see. And do you think that's going to happen with Jarmo, where we're going to see those big swings happen even earlier?
It's tough to tell, right? I think it's really tough because a lot of it does revolve around the Tuck extension and whether or not he's going to sign, because that's going to be a decent chunk of your cap space. That's going to tell you, okay, well, if X happens, I can do Y and Z now, instead of maybe doing Y and Z first. And then, okay, now what do we do with X, as in the Alex Tuck extension? It's tough to tell, though. They're on a 3-game winning streak. They have an opportunity to go over 500 Thursday. This should give a little bit of time. When you think about it, them playing Thursday should give a little bit of time for maybe Jarmo to figure out what's going on with him and his family, everything like that, which he should take as much time as he needs in that situation. Let Carmanos or Jerry Fortin take over the game take over the team for a week. I don't think that's the most of our concerns right now. When it comes to what could happen next, though, and whether or not they're going to be imminent trades, you got to remember, Jarmo, none of these guys besides really Danforth are Kekäläinen's guys. Adams brought them all in one shape or form, for the most part, other than 2 or 3 guys in Dahlin and Tage Thompson. So it's going to be extremely interesting. I think you're going to get a real clear view on what he views of these guys and their future. either A, when he talks and takes a press conference, or 2, probably before the trade deadline. If I have to imagine, my hope is that the guys on the ice take this as a sign of, well, I don't have the personal relationship of certainty going forward. I have an idea. Okay, well, my job's safe. I hope this brings a little bit of a spark and a motivation to, okay, well, now I have to play. There's a new regime. This isn't the guy that brought me in. You play motivated. Hopefully good things happen in that case and scenario. And you never know. Maybe that translates to the win column. Maybe it doesn't. But if Jarmo has any sort of doubt in whether or not if this team's within 5 points of the playoff come deadline, I think it's a very clear tell that Jarmo is going to be probably buying all in and throwing everything at the wall and hopes to make a playoff push.
Yeah, and I think we'll get a very big understanding of, not only of what Jarmo thinks this team can do, but even ownership in that extent of, are we going to see the Sabres be buyers or sellers? I don't think we're going to be in this weird middle ground come the deadline. And, it's going to be just a very, eventful, I'm hoping, next couple months where we get to see Jarmo kind of mold the team in his image and what, even make what the Sabres have work in a more sustainable way. Because like you said, they're on a 3-game winning streak. It's not like they lost 13 in a row like they were at this point last season. And, you need to, make the fire sale to keep the ship somewhat afloat. They did it, coming back from a 6-game road trip that they split where, they're finally winning games on the road. They finally won 3 in a row. It feels like pieces are starting to come together. So I'm excited to see if this lights a fire under this team going forward. But, Cars, I have a question for you. Like, we've seen a lot of Adams moves and a lot of big ones. Is there one that sticks out to you as your favorite that he's made? Because people love to, shit on Adams and whatever. We get the fire Adams chance anytime the Sabres are down like a couple goals in a game on home ice. But
I think it's got to be the Ryan McLeod trade, especially after what that clown Matt Larkin said about the Martin Erat thing and everything like that. Mm-hmm. He's never even seen either of those guys like in the other uniform. So I think it was a complete predetermined decision on that. And you look at it, Ryan McLeod's balling out. He gets in, a 4x5 contract extension this past summer. He earned that through and through. Although the point total isn't really where it was last year for him, he's noticeable every night. He flies up and down the ice. He's used on the power play. He's used on arguably one of our best penalty killers. He's a weapon come overtime. And you look at him against guys like McDavid. If you want to match him up against the other team's fastest skater, he provides that too. He's just so flexible in the way that you can use him because of A, how athletic he is, and 2, how he plays the game up and down the lineup. So I'd probably have to say that. And you look at, on the return side, it's nice that Matt Savoy hasn't necessarily put up astonishing numbers and makes plays night in, night out. That certainly contributes to the conversation. Yes. But I'd have to say Ryan McLeod. And I do think an underrated move, though, was getting Josh Norris. We haven't seen it turn out yet, but he's played 8 games with us. My math might be a little bit off here. I don't have the stats right in front of me, but 8 games, he's got 10 points. He's looked really good in his time here. He's done nice stuff on the power play. 5-on-5 could use a little bit of work, but last night just the tic-tac-toe play to Noah Osland on the 2-on-1, that right there just kind of shows you A, his transition game, and 2, the talent he has. It's impressive with Norris, and if they can surround him and continue to have health from him and surround him in the top 6, he's a guy who I think possibly could be a point-per-game type of player with us. But I'd say those 2 moves right off the bat, and then obviously I like the move with Utah too with JJ Peterka. Mm-hmm. But the McLeod trade, I think by far and away, is the one that a lot of fans were like, "Damn, that we gave up a lot for that," and it turned out kind of being the other way around, where hey, we won that trade.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, you look at that McLeod trade; it looks like the standalone winner. But I want to look at a couple comments here before. I mean, I think that's kind of been the biggest concern and gripe has been, he's put into a position that didn't seem like it made much sense to put him in. But, I want to look at his recent trades, especially this offseason, because they're ones that I think really benefit the Sabres from, the players brought in, but also subtraction. His last one, you moved out Sam Lafferty, whatever, but you bring in Connor Clifton and you move out Connor Timmins. or sorry, I flipped that. You bring in Connor Timmins, you lose Connor Clifton. I think Timmins, has had a weird stretch recently, but been a nice addition to the Sabres decor and really carried them to start the season when they were very, very injured. The JJ Peterka trade, you move on from Peterka, who, wasn't a great defender for you, but a young guy who could put up points, and you bring in, what we thought was the cornerstone of this move in Michael Kesselring, and a quote-unquote throw-in guy of Josh Stone, who's been a rock star for them. And it feels like every move Adams made, whether it be that one, whether it be trading Dylan Cousin, it feels like, the talk is the Sabres get fleeced every single move when the move happens. But it always feels like they find, ways for these guys who might be undervalued nationally or in certain markets to get the most out of their game in Buffalo. And, there's a lot we can say about his tenure here and, not making the right moves, not making moves, period. But when those moves are made, they could have ended up a lot worse for the Sabres, where you think you move out the door, Sam Reinhart, Jack Eichel, JJ Peterka, Dylan Cousins, the list goes on. And the fact that, you look at the standings, it's bad, but the roster they have is, a lot better than it probably should be.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought the lineup up too, because this year, me and my roommate talk about it all the time. Like, the offseason that Adams put together, like this team, I'm fine with how it looks. Mm-hmm. Like, you look at the development, especially from the internal development that Adams always kind of talked about when it comes to the guys from Rochester, who you had an assumption that Roseanne was boom or bust year for him. So you were going to get an answer there. Ostlund looked great to start the year in Rochester. Comes up as arguably probably one of their best players night in, night out as far as consistency is concerned. And then Josh Stone, absolute hammer. People were talking about him being on the fourth line and kind of playing, 10 minutes a night, right? Not the case.
No.
And then
first line guy now.
Right, exactly. Kesselring's unfortunate, but it is what it is. He's going to be back. Hopefully he can be playing some good hockey. But he invested in depth, too, with veteran guys like Danforth in the bottom six. He went after Zach Jones. I get it's a minor movie. He's really played with the Sabres.
I love Zach Jones. Still, by the way.
Yes, not WGR Zach Jones, but Sabres Zach Jones.
Yeah,
it was just – I'm fine with the roster it's put together. I think it's really unfortunate that they were missing out on Zucker and Benson, Kulik with blood clots, like all those guys. It's unfortunate how that kind of played out, Greenway included, with injury and everything like that. But it's tough, too. You look at what they hit the post for the most in the NHL, too, for like the first 10 games. It's still a pretty high number. Like, maybe if some of those go differently, maybe still Adams has his job. They're like 2 games over 500. It's just unfortunate things. But at the end of the day, like, you were here for 6 seasons. It just can't be something that you look at a game-to-game basis with a general manager, and for it to be year 6 and it kind of be a year where it's like, okay, well, now this is when I'm happy with the roster. And even then, they do sputter at times. They're inconsistent as hell at times as well. Yeah, it's just we need more consistency. We need more, and I think that was part of the reason why they moved on. But not to change the subject a little bit here, because I'll pass back to you, Gatesy. But year off, his contract's coming up, right? He's getting a year older. The book says they're probably not going to make the playoffs. That's what the book says. I'm not. I'm a little more
6 points out, which is wild.
Right. I'm more hopeful than the book.
Yes.
Talked about it a little bit last night. Him and Torts are boys. What is possibly the situation there, or what's it going to look like behind the bench as far as assistants go next year? I'm just kind of curious, these are all type of questions that are going to have to be answered. It's not just players. It also comes to the front offices. They're going to be, front office moves with scouts and assistant general managers. Is he going to bring his own guys in? It's all stuff that, has to be unraveled here in the next few months.
Yeah, it definitely does. And it's interesting because I wasn't really, I don't know if believing was the fire or like the smoke around Adams being fired, but it wasn't until I saw the Lindy Ruff presser when Ostlund got sent down, and he just felt like it didn't make sense to him why they sent him down when, there's players on this roster, to quote Sean McDermott, but some of these players on the roster have not been to the level that they should be at, and we're really punishing guys for finding their game in the NHL level. And it felt like there was that disconnect between Lindy Ruff and Kevyn Adams. And after that point, it just made sense to me that they are going to move on from Adams. And it feels like, at least to me, that you brought up Lindy Ruff's contract, that once it's done, they move him into a front office role. And I feel like that's what made sense when they brought him in. he kind of, ideally gets the ship back on track. And, some people have been, aren't big Jarmo fans, but, you even see improvements to the scouting department could be good. People are giving Adams a C+ grade. And even addition from subtraction from Adams by getting rid of guys like JJ and Cousins. But back to my point, it's, when that disconnect is there between the coaching and the GM, you're going to have, issues on the ice. And it feels like Ruff is going to be into that, management position, whether that be in hockey ops or part of the organization, some capacity. Once he's done coaching, he ideally would get the ship back on track and go from there. But I don't know, Carson, do you see Ruff, say the season goes as is? I guess I'll give you two options. The Sabres don't make the playoffs, Ruff's contract's up. What do you think happens there? Or, the Sabres do make the playoffs or finish great and, somehow every other team catches fire as well. What do you think is next for Lindy Ruff? Do you see him also out the door kind of soon, or do you see him being a part of the Sabres long term?
If they finish 90+ points, Lindy's earned the right to have that decision. Whether or not he's going to retire or take a job in hockey operations or the front office, I think those are the two options if they finish well. Let's say they finish with 85 or below points. I think at that point in time, then you give Lindy the option, hey, like if you want to be front office, you've put your life basically to this organization. With that said, your contract's up. I think it's time we mutually part ways. I think that's kind of the thing if they miss out on the playoffs in an 85-point or less fashion, which is certainly possible. It definitely brings up a tough decision, though, especially with the new GM with Jarmo. He wasn't the one who directly hired Lindy the second time around. I'm not 100% sure how his relationship is with Lindy. Maybe it's great. Maybe it's, maybe they dispute on a few things. But it's interesting. Lindy's getting a year older. He's been here, for second year now. Before that, he's been in the league for a minute. He's highly respected. I know there's guys who like him. He's a guy who could help you when it comes to free agency and making trades and everything like that. A lot of guys in the league have played under him or played against him and respect him. Highly respected guy. I think that is certainly something that is in a way helping you now with him as your head coach, but also at the same time, if he's in your front office, I think he could provide you with a ton of connections and help you there as well.
Yeah, what's great? Like Jarmo is now the 10th GM in Sabres history, which I thought was honestly more just based on how the drought's been of cycling through some guys. And, I said it to start the show, I think it was before you're on, but how consequential the Adams GM tenure was, where you look at all these big moves and all these things that happen. Like, for whatever reason in my head, like I didn't think he's GM for that long, but really he's been the GM for the Sabres for a while. And it kind of gives me some hope for the future that these moves are being made. You look back to the Sabres even bringing in Jarmo into the organization when they did, and now promoting him then. It feels like, at least for fans, the biggest gripe has been the lack of, will to win, it feels like, from ownership. And a move like this with getting rid of a GM who appears to be, very close with Terry Pegula. They talk daily, Adams said. To, move on to Jarmo, to see some change, feels just, from a fan or someone who at least watches the team a lot, that the organization does care and they do want to get better. So we'll see what Jarmo does. It
also feels weird. I'm not going to lie. Adams has been in charge so long. It's like, I don't know differently at this point. I remember in the summertime, I believe it was like coming out of COVID, while we were in COVID, I remember seeing the tweet on my phone, Sabres hired General Manager or Kevyn Adams as General Manager. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Like, we just fired Botterill, and then a few days later, it's like, okay, who is this? You do your research, and then a few weeks later, all of a sudden, Eric Stahl. It's like, okay, well, maybe he's got a little bit of pull. Then we get Taylor Hall. I'm like, okay. And then you get the 91-point season, and things start to go well, and maybe it looks like Kevyn Adams is kind of the guy along with Don Granato, and you fast forward a few years, and it's kind of flipped upside down. But I find it funny, though. I was looking through some of Jarmo's trades. His last trade as a Blue Jackets general manager, he's always been loyal to the Sabre Crest. He traded Eric Robinson for a 7th-round pick to us. And then, going through a few of his other trades, too, Ivan Provorov for Kevin Connaughton straight up. Go down the list here.
Yeah.
Here's a big one as well. Jonathan Quick, a 1st-round pick and a 3rd-round pick for Gavrikov and Korpisalo. That was quite the scenario, too, that happened a few years ago. Voracek for Atkinson, and then this was kind of a big one where I think Jarmo kind of won this trade heavily. He gave up Seth Jones, a first-round pick, and a sixth-round pick to Chicago in exchange for Adam Boquist, 2 firsts, and a second-round pick. I think if you're Columbus, you're pretty happy with that return. I mean, the list goes on. That's just kind of some of his most recent stuff. But again, a guy who's not afraid to take risks. He'll take a gamble, and I think that right now that's a good thing for this organization to have.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always talks on too of like Remy saying here of it's hard to make moves, and Adams said it plenty of times with guys no trade clauses, but it's weird because you can look through the moves Adams made, and I think you can be happy with them. Like you look at the trades, especially the ones recently, even the acquisitions and free agency this offseason, like Alex Lyon has been a great addition. Like he won the Sabres so many games to start the season. He's been back to that form on this West Coast road trip after Colton Ellis goes down. But there's also moves that just are kind of puzzling, whether it be just the odd, mainly right now, the odd roster construction where you're still carrying 3 goalies because that you have to send down young players who are playing well. You're penalizing guys for finally finding their footing in the NHL over, to keep guys on this roster who, you signed to contracts that don't look too great right now, that you kind of are stuck with. So not making moves that are difficult seems to be a big plague right now. And, even you look back at, I think, unfortunately for him, like one of the more iconic things of his tenure was that press conference a little over a year ago talking about the palm trees and the taxes and all that. So yeah, and one last thing too, I like this point here that, Lindy needs to be able to pick his own coaching staff. It was very disheartening when those reports came out that Ruff, wasn't really able to do that. So we've seen, a lot of disdain for the Sabres assistant coaches, on Twitter from Sabres fandom on that. So I'm excited to see what Lindy does here. The PK has been great this season. Their power play is finding form now that they're getting their stars back healthy, and, they're not having Josh Dunn run a power play unit anymore. So I'm excited to see how that looks. But do you think, say Ruff gets control of the coaching staff, that we'll see moves there, or they're going to kind of keep things steadfast?
No, I think we're way past that point in time. I think if they were going to fire an assistant coach, it would have been in the offseason, not when you're at game 32. And besides the point, the Sabres power play has been nice lately. Like it's been effective with shout out Seth Appert. Like he's another guy who, when Adams was here, they loved him. Like he helped. Remember the report back in the summer? Like he was a part of the front office.
Making moves. Yeah, he was.
Exactly. He was part of the Josh Norris deal. Like they value him big time. So if there was somebody that Sabres fans would point to as, hey, that's a likely option. Again, I don't know anything, right? But just looking at the time and throwing the logistics together, I don't think Seth Appert or anybody else is going to be gone. Marty Wilford's done a tremendous job with this penalty kill. I think the defense has played fine, nothing spectacular. The defensemen have been all right this year. They need some help from the goaltending aspect. I mean, maybe Mike Bell's the goalie coach, who seems like he's been here since the 1990s. It's just like Mike Bell's has been here since, I think, if I'm saying this right, I believe Ralph Kruger. So he's been here since 2019. So it's been a minute with him. Maybe he's the one guy they look to. It's to the point now where like Matt Ellis is in the press box every night. It's not like he has a direct outcome on the outcome of the game. I don't foresee any of the assistant coach things happening. Maybe if it does, it does. But it's just kind of a weird time of the season to be going kind of picking and weaving your way through. I think it's better off when you see guys from other teams get fired or their contracts run out, and you kind of go through coach free agency as well, rather than trying to pick and weave people off their couch.
100%. And, I want to appreciate and say thanks to everyone commenting along, the 4,500 people that have stopped in so far on a Monday at 2:00 to talk about, the Sabres moving on from Kevyn Adams. I want to throw a question to the people watching at home right now or wherever you're watching. What letter grade would you give Kevyn Adams for his, 5 years in Buffalo? I'm very curious to see that. I've seen some C pluses in chat, but I want to see how people are feeling. And Carson, I can kick off if you want, or you can go first. But I'm curious, a letter grade. I know you just got through finals, I believe. So
no, we got 2 more coming up, Gatesy.
Oh God, well, good luck with that. But what grade would you give him as I roll through some letters coming in chat?
Patrick, before I get to that, Patrick Barber just absolutely ripped Mike Bunt in the comments with a hilarious shirt.
I'll throw it back up.
If you want to show that, you could. Yeah, the Bunt's haircut thing's hilarious. But to quickly touch on Adams' grade, I'd say C+ is fair. They didn't end up getting over the hump. It's a results business. They didn't get the results that they wanted to. With that said, though, they had the most success under any GM since Darcy Regier here. I think that is a credit to Kevyn Adams and the group to a certain extent. I do realize that maybe there were some times where he was constricted on some of the decisions that he could make. And that's difficult for anybody. And at the same time, you're facing the internal pressure of being a local guy. You want it yourself. And then more importantly, externally too, right? Like as the years go on in the playoff drought, the pressure increases. It becomes harder and harder as you kind of start to dig yourself a hole to get free agents to come here, for guys to remove no trade clauses. That's kind of basically impossible now. He's right though. Like, you do have taxes that you deal with. It's not the biggest thing, right? Because you had a team like Winnipeg be successful lately, but it is something that factors in to whether or not a player is going to sign with a team in Florida or a team that's going to sign in New York. Like, it is something that is the case. It's a little bit more of a small market. It's a great hockey market, but it's still smaller. And it always seems like Buffalo in a way is getting dunked on for the hockey team. So it's difficult. Like, he was playing an uphill. He was racing an uphill battle right there. Like, it's just tough. But yeah, I'd give him a C+. I thought he did some things well over the course of his time. Team had the most success in the last 13 years under him compared to anybody else running the show. But still, wasn't enough. And after year 6, he's gone.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I really like reading these comments coming in for the moves. And everyone does feel to be on the same page, oddly enough, that the moves he made, turned out well. There's a comment up here from Boris that I know I was going to say a C- for the exact same reasons, where you see trades being made that, feel like they benefit the Sabres, and that you have a, especially situation when you look at the Jack Eichel stuff and, him wanting out. How do you get value from a guy like Jack Eichel? And while those moves were made, and good ones at that, McLeod, I saw someone bring up the Middlestat one as well. I think that's the same comment from Boris. Like, there were some moves in there that really benefited the Sabres and, got rid of players who didn't fit what they needed in terms of, playing both ends of the ice. We saw Sabres teams that were run and gun that could only play at one end, and they moved on from those guys. They brought in guys that could play both sides of the puck, that brought speed, that brought, some more awareness, and that I think we all thought would make the Sabres better, especially this season, that we could see genuine change in terms of standings. But it's just unfortunate, especially for Adams, that so many of these guys missed a lot of games this season with injury, with, like family stuff and, unfortunately, like weird, sicknesses, illnesses, unfortunately, Kulik's blood clot. Like, there was a lot that happened. And unfortunately, it's not, a free pass, because when you're on year 14 of a playoff drought, fans want change. They want to see things happen. And, you're on your year 5 of your tenure and that still hasn't changed. That is unfortunately a big issue. And I see some Columbus fans here talking about Jarmo. And yeah, there's not to say that Columbus went on to win the cup when he was there. And even some people here saying the Peterka trade was bad. They thought that, it's weird because Peterka and Doan are very similar in points right now. And we haven't really seen much of Kesselring, and yet the player he was expected to be in Buffalo, the games he played, he wasn't, good by any stretch of the imagination. So we'll see what happens when he's hopefully back here healthy this week. But yeah, Carson, I want to just pick your brain on, that aspect of Adams making good moves, but the piece is not coming together. Like, what does that feel like for you, that you look at the trades, some of the signings, but they couldn't pull together on the ice?
Yeah, it always seemed like, you brought the analogy up of thinking ship. Like, it always seemed when one thing they would improve on, it was another thing that would be taken away. Like, we've seen years where, like, for example, the Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen year where he just went off ever since January 1st all the way to the end of the season. They just couldn't score. Like, that was a difficult thing. They had trouble scoring that year. Their special teams weren't good. And then you go to a year where they're run and gun. the year that they had 91 points, they couldn't A, make a save, or B, defend. So it just kind of was a revolving door and what their identity truly was. And I think they had an identity shift numerous different times. Like they were run and gun, and then after the 91-point season, they wanted to play better defensively, which was fair, but I think it came at the cost of them scoring goals. And then after that, they wanted to play harder to play against, so they brought in guys like Lafferty, Nicholas Aube-Kubel, and then Malenstein, which the idea is there. It's fine. It just didn't pan out. And then you look at this year, they're kind of back to that run and gun type of style. And that we'll see how that turns out with how they use their identity going forward with Kekäläinen. But that comment that was just shown about uncomfortability, like that's kind of what I was getting at. I think that's a good thing at the point in time. Like I hope the guys don't view this as, okay, the season's over. And they shouldn't, because there's so much time left. And I think Lindy's a veteran coach to the point where if they still respect him, which I believe they do, they're going to believe his message of, hey, this is time to show. This is a tremendous opportunity. If you're a guy who was underperforming beforehand, the slate's brand new. Like we're back to 0-0. The guy who's watching above, making the decisions on you, this is your opportunity to prove to him that you should be here. And if you had success in the past, guess what? That doesn't matter either. Repeat that success. Stay on the team. It's kind of like simple as that, right? Like obviously financials and contract play a role in that, but this is a great opportunity for guys who maybe have minimal minutes to show that they should earn their minutes and get some more minutes, and guys who've had some success to realize, okay, well, I have to prove it again. And hopefully the culmination of those two things should provide a little bit of a spark in the lineup, and hopefully they can continue this win streak, take advantage of the opportunity, capture the moment, and maybe run with this thing. We'll have to see. It can go two different ways. It can go south real bad because some of these guys might think it's over, and you never know what happens, or it sparks a shift and the team rides this three-game winning streak, and they use this as an added jolt, and you never know where this can take us.
Yeah. And it's interesting too to look at the guys you talked about, and even like comments like here, Krebs and Bryson. I thought Bryson's been phenomenal stepping in. Have that I talked about it in my show last night, that the D partnership of Jacob Bryson, Owen Power had every opportunity to be the biggest fire we've ever seen before on the ice, and they've been serviceable. Like, I mean, you got to look at through the expectations of, these two as defensemen on their own end. Like, yeah, they've had moments in front of their own goal, mainly like 2-5 at times, but, there's been some progression, some of these players, but it's interesting to think too, because one of Kevyn Adams' biggest things as a GM was signing guys long-term after their ELC. He wasn't too big of a bridge guy. Like we saw issues with, doing that for Sam Reinhart. And it feels like he really, took that to heart by, signing Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin, who was on a bridge before that, Owen Power, Matthias Samuelsson, Dylan Cousins. He moved on from Peterka, who was on that track. He got paid big in Utah. And yeah, if Bryson was bigger, people wouldn't complain. And, it's interesting now because you do have a lot of contracts up this summer and extensions that could be made now. And now it's okay. I think as people who watch the Sabres a lot, we kind of expect guys in that world to get paid long-term, and we're going to hope they get to that level soon, or else you're going to be paying a guy like Owen Power $8 million for a couple years until he can hopefully get to that level. So it's interesting to see, and I think it's going to really kick up how these guys are playing. Not saying that, Josh Doan isn't playing night in and night out, but you look at a guy like Alex Tuck, who I think played is probably one of his best games all season last night after returning, getting 2 assists, having a breakup in, the O-zone to create a scoring chance. Did Adams bridge Reinhart? That's kind of all blur at this point.
I don't think so. I believe that was Botterill. But
yeah, that was Botterill. Yeah, it's well, even too, like the trade for Norris, you look at it too, it's unfortunate injuries, and yeah, we could talk a while on that.
Gates, I have a question for you.
Yeah, sure. I go for it.
So this might be a dumb question. Tell me if it's a dumb question. But in the report that Friedman had this morning, it said Kevyn Adams was frustrated during the road trip, even after they started winning, right? What do you think that means? Like, why do you think he was frustrated? Do you think it was maybe because they had a conversation that either A, things have to change, you're going to be out, maybe B, they told him directly, this is your final stint here, or C, because things were starting to swirl, leak around, and maybe he wasn't directly in conversation, thus creating like a ton of stress on him. And he was probably, if you kind of get my drift here, or D, maybe because the team was just performing badly. Like, what do you kind of think? Maybe a culmination of everything there? Like,
I would say a culmination of everything. And for me, what would be the most frustrating is, at least for him, he's finally seeing the team he's built perform to the level they should. And, it sucks this year with how injury riddled and just, guys out of the lineup they have been, that we haven't really fully seen, the Sabres team that he put together and, the additions and everything. And they're still not there. Like, your biggest move of the offseason was Michael Kesselring. We've seen him for a handful of games. I think the frustrating part would be the Sabres finally won 3 in a row. They're finally, playing hockey where, they're shutting things down in the third period. They're getting leads. They're playing a more, it feels like a Lindy Ruff style where it's not my favorite, but they park a bus in the third period and they survive. And, it's worked out for them so far. It probably won every game. But, I think that's where that frustration has to be. And the weird part, too, you talk about stuff getting leaked out. The national media loves to use the Sabres as engagement for their stuff, whether, because they know their fans care and there's stuff to talk about. But it feels like everything I heard about Adams leading up to today really came from local. You have the Tim Grahams, you have, was it Jeremy White talking about it as well, Chad, like, it wasn't like you have Elliot Friedman and Frank Saravelli putting out every day, oh, there's something happened with Adams. Like, it was pretty low key until very recently. So I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's always weird because, like, where guys get their sources is always interesting to me. Like, we've seen Kevin Weeks kind of at times be the guy with the Sabres when it came to like the Eichel trade, and like something was leaked about Tkachuk possibly being the return for the Sabres. And I don't think there's something along the lines of like Vegas not liking that because they had to like increase their price. The use of sources has always been fascinating to me. Like, where Jeremy White has his like super secret Sabres sources, like, kind of interesting to me. I wonder.
Wonderful source though. I'd like one of those
because it's been consistent over time. If I do remember correctly, if what I was told was right, because then it's somebody who I don't know. I just wonder where it is because it's a small community. People talk, and the use of sources can be a really powerful thing. Like Friedman, we've seen at times not always be the greatest source with the Sabres, and same with like Jeff Merrick too at times. Like Merrick speculated
as well.
Right, exactly. Well, Frank Cervelli is an interesting human in himself.
Throwing darts all the time.
Yes, he's a shot chucker, but it's interesting. Like, I do wonder where it kind of came from. Like, because we did see Tim Grand, Fairbairn, great article they put out on it. They were basically, and I thought it was really kind of like, first of all, good props to journalism on that aspect. Like, to the fact that they even, I believe, texted Kevyn Adams like, hey, are you still employed by that team here? What's going on? Like, do you have a comment? Obviously, he didn't answer, but still, it's just interesting to see how this kind of transpired locally. And I think that kind of shows that some of these local media teams are needed and local journalism is still alive. And it was also kind of interesting to see like the phrasing Friedman had. It was almost like let's be honest with ourselves. Like, Elliot Friedman probably knew this was going to happen, but why didn't he say it? Like, if he didn't know, the slim chance he didn't know, I could understand it. But like, the guy knows everything. So to me, I just find that fascinating the way he kind of worded it. He's like, a lot of smoke around Buffalo. We'll have to see. They're going to have a talk, and it's just interesting. It's fascinating to see. And local journalism had this one.
Yeah, it's I'm always a big proponent of local journalism. We need, especially like newspaper, whatever. Like, it's very important. So I'm glad these guys are working hard and getting some recognition because it's dark covering the Sabres team on a daily basis. And, I'm just very excited to see what's next. And do we know what moves Jarmo's going to make? No, I think there's some expectations from the fan base. I'm seeing a lot of people talking about, moving a goalie at this point. We're all fed up with the 3 goalie rotation. Like, Colton Ellis has been skating back in Buffalo after he got taken out of, I believe, the Edmonton game.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's, at the forefront of things. You see, these young guys finding their game. Roseanne was a scratch last night. So it's like, why have these guys up in Buffalo if they're not even going to be playing? So it's not like, Jarmo's coming in and has, nothing to do now that this team's kind of healthy again. It's now the difficult moves that haven't been made this season really need to be made of, moving on from guys who aren't playing a lot so you can give some space for your young kids, or, what be it if you move on from UPL, you give Levi a shot, you just run with Line and Ellis, move on from Ellis. Like, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to go through some comments here. Yep. Thank you, Cryptid, for catching back up with this one. And yeah, I'm interested to hear, with like WGR, I saw someone say they're talking football. I mean, it's a double victory Monday, Carson, and I think a lot of people are thinking this is a triple victory Monday now that, a guy that they didn't really like the job of for the Sabres GM is gone. So we'll see what happens here. Any kind of final thoughts? We start to wrap things up, and we kind of move toward an hour live after Kevyn Adams has been fired.
Yeah, who would have thought, Gatesy? I mean, a little emergency pod we threw on here. Shout out to all the people taking their time out of the day to talk some Sabres with us.
Awesome.
But
6,000 people.
Yes, here's another thing that I thought interesting here, I guess, before I wrap it up here in the next 10 or so minutes, if we do plan on going that long. It's the consistent fire Adams chance in the last, 2 years that were going on, and Terry was at his fair share of games for those. I wonder if maybe that had anything to do with it. I doubt it, right? Because, at the end of the day, fans are going to be fans. Like, Terry does, as much as people hate it, he knows more about what's going in and outside of the organization because he's in a lot of those meetings more than likely, and he knows what's going to be coming and what the ideology is. And it seemed Adams this year, they had a conversation at the end before the season. I think this is something that a lot of people forget, is they had to talk about what's going to have to change. Like, what do we have to do? And I think that was part of the reason why Kekäläinen came in, was because he needed added support in that front office from a veteran guy, and they did just that. And of course, the writing was on the wall a little bit there that, hey, like, if it doesn't work out, Kekäläinen's probably going to be our guy. And it kind of worked out that way for the Sabres, unfortunately, I guess, for Saberhood in general, because if the team was succeeding, Kevyn Adams wouldn't have gotten fired. And I think everybody right now would sacrifice the team winning over Kevyn Adams getting fired. And I guess just final thoughts as it is, and for those people that just joined, I said this at the beginning of the show, but at the end of the day, we do got to remember, hey, this is a person too, right? Like, Kevyn Adams, he played in the league a long time. He's got his fair share of wealth. He's probably never going to have to work another day again in his life if he wants to. But it's holiday season. Thank you, Mr. Chewy63. It's holiday season. To see somebody get fired 10 days before Christmas, it's always tough to see. It's a guy who's got a family. He Buffalo guy as well. He invested a lot into the program, a lot into the organization over the years. For it to come up short, it stinks. But it is a business, and I think this is the move that we kind of envisioned for a minute now, for one reason or another. But this is a move I think that kind of needed to take place if you're looking from the lens of the hierarchy of the ownership of the front office and probably even some of the players' inputs too. Like, this is something that needed to change, and hopefully it can revitalize this team. Hopefully they don't falter or fold here, seeing one of the top dogs go down, but instead it motivates them, and hopefully they can seize the moment of an opportunity in itself to prove to a new general manager, like, I belong to be on the team in the future. This is, I'm part of the solution and not the issue here. So hopefully they can run with that. Hopefully it shows up in the win column, and it's still early in the season. So why can't we make a push?
100%. And I agree with everything you're saying there. And I do have something that I think, I don't say it'll get me canceled, but might turn heads the wrong way. I think we'll look back on Kevyn Adams' GM tenure in, let's say, 5 to 10 years, and we look at how the players he drafted, the players he traded for, how their careers ended up in Buffalo. And I want to say that we'll look back on it positively of, he brought in players. You look at the guys he's drafted, they're finally finding their footing in the NHL level. Isak Rose and Noah Austin being big additions to the Sabres this year, looking like totally different players than what we saw last season, looking like totally different players than what we saw in the Prospect Challenge just a few months ago, where you could barely even notice them out there. And seeing, draft picks like that, getting Zach Benson when he did in the first round, who's been a mainstay on the Sabres, and he's finally finding his footing, finding goals in back-to-back games. Signing Tage Thompson, Rasmus Dahlin to long-term deals, Matthias Samuelsson to what looks like a phenomenal contract right now. I think we'll look back on those moves fondly that, he brought in Ryan McLeod for Matt Savoy. you see the trades of bringing in Josh Stone. Like, there's a lot of moves here that I think we'll look fondly at, in a couple years' time. The big issue is just not having it all come together at the right time for him. Having, one move that needs to be made, having a 91-point season and not being able to capitalize on that. Still kind of chasing what that team was in some capacity. So I think bringing a guy like Jarmo, in my mind, can clean that up a bit, where we all know there's pieces here to this roster and this lineup that we've seen success with. It's just making it work in a more sustainable manner. And people giving him enough still, which is fair. And I'm excited to see what Jarmo does, a guy that's been around and a guy that has experience being the general manager of Buffalo Sabres, because I forget who said, it might have been Bunty, the only general manager the Sabres have hired with GM experience was their first GM, who was the GM of the Leafs prior, and I believe it was Scotty Bowman before that. And those two, and that was it, I believe. Like, they haven't had the history of hiring these guys. So I'm excited with Jarmo, what they can do. We know the players are here. I'm excited to see what he can do to hopefully get this team out of the basement, into that next level. And it's not like we're going to go through a full rebuild right now. I think there's a little bit of retool, reshuffle, and get the most out of what is here in Buffalo. But before I sign off, Cars, any final thoughts, or how you feeling?
Yeah, just the last thing. I think Kevyn Adams is going to kind of be almost like a presidency. History might do him justice. I said it earlier. Yep. I think he did the dirty work of this team. He took some of the chances when it came off to shipping, the old stars and the people that needed to get off the bus. He had to get them off the bus to bring the new guys on the bus, as Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane used to coin that phrase. And I think he kind of did that. I think, the players that he brought in through the draft, obviously incredibly young, and then through trades, those guys were also, for the most part, pretty young as well. And I think when he did make those moves, more times than not, they paid off. It was just at times probably a lack of seizing an opportunity in exchange for hoping for internal growth. And I think that's kind of how it got summed up. But still, like you said, Gatesy, I'm excited to see what happens with Jarmo here. It's going to take some time for him and his vision to kick in. But hopefully this can be the step that maybe the Sabres need to finally break that playoff trope.
100%. And, Kevyn Adams' last move he ever made as general manager, at least one that isn't like bringing guys up and down, was signing Trevor Kuntar, a local kid, a guy that, Adams' family knows. Yeah, like, I'm close with his brother. So that's the move, that personally made me happy. I had a field day on Twitter, tweeting about Trevor Kuntar. And, we have some great shirts as well on our Trainwreck Sports Etsy. Trevor Kuntar equals big leaguer, as well as, shirts on the other end of that spectrum of sell the team. We also have, your other Buffalo football style shirts, Trainwreck Sports Etsy. Should be linked in the description once we're off of here. But I do want to thank the over 6,300 people that stopped in today. A ton of new people on the YouTube. So if you're still watching, please like, comment, subscribe. We go live, every Thursday for our podcast. Any breaking news like this, I'm sure if there's a move, we'll do this again. Thank you for, you've been here the whole time, Rarbo. Appreciate it. And go Bandits and see that profile picture there. We got some big stuff this year for our Sabres coverage, whether that's our Thursday Crossing Swords podcast, my Gatesy's Win More, Lots More every post game. And we have a ton of other stuff covering the Bills, Bandits, Sabres, everything you can imagine. So, again, thank you, everyone here. It has been a great, time talking to everyone here. And, again, I'm just excited to see what is next for the Sabres. And, Cars, I guess we only have a couple days till our next show. Who knows if we'll go live again before then. But, I just want to thank everyone here. And let's go Sabres.